Hi, my name is Marie Chang, and today I'm going to show you how you can draw yourself as a character in Over the Garden Wall. I'll be doing this tutorial on my iPad Pro in Adobe Fresco, but you can do this on paper or using your own materials or tablet. The principles are the same no matter what medium you're using. As always, I'm going to start by pulling reference of all the female characters in this show that I think would be a good reference for me. I like seeing how some of the characters have more almond shaped eyes and also seeing the different variation on the nose shapes. That was really helpful for me as I started designing my own version of an Over the Garden Wall character. So to start off, I took this still from a frame in the show where there's a lot of other kind of tween aged girls in it, just because that's the age that I'm going to draw myself as. So I kind of just did a rough drawing of the shapes that they use to construct this design, and also just taking a look at the proportions between the head and the body and all the other limbs. So that's the way that I usually start out, and then from there I can rough in other elements of my design. I decided to go with a little circular nose, kind of like the one that Greg has, just because it best mimics my nose itself. And I went with the more almond looking eyes. I, of course, wanted to incorporate a dog somehow, just because there are so many animals in this show and they're all so cute. So I decided to draw myself carrying my pet corgi, Archie. And yeah, once I had that really, really rough sketch down, I started to do the rough line art. I don't always do this step, but because this design was a little more complex. I'm holding something and there's multiple, there's technically two characters in this scene. I just wanted to make sure that I was able to have the right blueprint before moving on to a clean line. I didn't want to feel pressured to go to that stage without having this clean. So I decided to just do this stage, which again, you don't have to do, but it was very helpful for me. At this stage, I'm just trying to focus on getting the shapes, making sure that it feels like the volumes are solid, and trying to get the idea down. My proportions can be changed later, the details of my outfit and costume can be changed later, but right now I just want to make sure that the bones of my drawing make sense and work. So, I'm kind of trying to figure out, how do I want to carry this dog, what looks right. Once I think I have an idea of it done, I always invert my drawing to check the proportions. I'm fixing the eyes a little bit and the eyebrows. And I'm also taking a look at whether or not I look like I'm balanced and whether it looks like I'm standing on something solid, or, sometimes it looks like I'm about to fall over. So you're really just looking out for little things like that. So upon looking at this further, I realized that I didn't like the way I had drawn my hands. And, I wanted to try different ways of approaching this. The characters in Over the Garden Wall have really small hands compared to their faces. And they're also a little bit more like anatomically rooted, as opposed to your traditional noodle arms that you'll see in like Gravity Falls or Adventure Time. Like, there's clearly a joint in the way that they're constructed, and I just want to make sure that my hands and the way that I was holding this corgi felt like it had proper weight, but also like cartoony enough to cheat certain things. So it was just a lot of experimentation. I decided to try something new with my corgi design, and in order to do that, I just duplicated my original drawing just to save it in case I decided that I want to go back. So you're always free to do that. That's one of the perks of digital drawing. So once I had this version of it, I wanted to shorten the neck a little and make the corgi look a little like stumpier and loafier. I thought it would be cuter. And I also thought it would be more natural, because right now, or before, the way the corgi was stretching his neck felt a little bit odd to me. And this feels a lot more like the way a corgi would actually look if you picked it up and held it by its belly. So I'm pretty happy with that, and now I'm just going to go back and kind of clarify some of the areas that I was working on before. I'm going to make sure that my hair is clear, and I'm going to take a look at my eyes. I kind of wanted to match the way that they did it in the show. Sometimes they'll have the characters just looking out into camera in a lot of their press images, or so at least that's the way that I interpret it, and I kind of liked that feeling. Normally I would have my character looking at the dog and the dog dog looking back at me, but this felt just a little bit more interesting to me. Honestly, I think it's because of that still up there where, I don't know if you can see it, but all the dogs are looking kind of backwards right off into camera, and I really liked that. So once I'm happy with that design, I'm going to go ahead and start on the clean line art. So for this, I'm just going to use the pen ink tool in Adobe Fresco. It's not the same as like the pen tool in Illustrator exactly. It's not vector based, but I really like how smooth this comes out. I like that this width in particular matches the line art in the show. I always try to make sure that my characters look as much as they can like characters in the show, as if, you know, an artist who was working on it actually designed this themselves. So yeah, that's just something that I like to keep in mind. I loved drawing this corgi. It was so fun. Making sure that all of my lines are in one smooth motion to try to get it, you know, as clean as possible. And when I'm doing this, I like to periodically invert my drawing and then actually do some of the line art from the opposite view so that I get a consistent sense of ensuring that my proportions are correct and that the volume is retained in my actual drawings. I'm sure you've also noticed that I don't really do the clean line art in the order of like how the actual shapes appear. Like I'm not going top to bottom or anything like that, or from one character first and then doing the next. I actually like to do it in terms of easiness. So I'll do the lines that I know I understand and can totally get, and then I'll do the harder ones later on, which isn't always the best, but it does help me a lot. The nice thing about doing the eyes is that you can just duplicate them over, and the mouth, you can just copy existing mouth shapes. So that's always really helpful. And now I'm going to do the little frills. And I ended up not being super happy with the way these turned out. And so I just erased it, and I was like, you know what? I'll go back to this later. And then I decided to try the hands, and all these hands turned out really hideous looking. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try the dress. So, you know, sometimes the third item you attempt is the charm. So now I'm just going through, you know, and carefully doing the little frills and some of the detailing on the dress. I just want to show that there's a little bit of a fold there, but nothing too complex. And then the same goes for the bottom hem where it meets my shoes, which are going to be just very simple and honestly, I think a solid color. The nice thing about this show style is that I feel like they capture a lot of warmth and character in the outfits without being really busy and overly detailed. So you're still able to, you know, keep it relatively simple, but I don't feel like I'm losing anything in terms of the tone or the mood or the actual essence of the show. So I'm just fixing the eyebrows here, and then I'm going to go through and just find little areas that I think can be improved, and slowly make my way to doing the hardest parts, which unsurprisingly are those hands and that neckline frill. So now that I've saved the worst for last, I'm going to have to slowly chip away at it because there's nothing else for me to do on this image. So, you know, I'm just going to go through the process, and it's okay if this takes you a couple tries or if you have to invert your drawing multiple times to get it right. I felt like I had to keep going back and forth because every time I switched it one way, it just felt like something was off or something looked weird, and I'd rather just take some time away from it and get it right than have it be something that I'm not super happy with at the end. And it turns out for the frills, it's a lot easier to draw the straight hem first, or the straight line, and then do the frills, you know, off of that as a guide. For these hands, I referenced what I saw in the show. They're still very cartoony, you know, they still have only, or they do have 5 fingers total, but I drew just the 4, you know, that are showing on this end. And they're not super anatomically accurate to what you would see, but I just wanted to keep them simple. I added a little bit of definition in that corgi design so we could see the difference in his fur color. And yeah, now I'm just going to clean up some of those detail lines and make sure that I am happy with the line art before I start color. So for the color, I wanted to choose like a light purple shade to match the t-shirt that I'm wearing in my photo reference. I also love purple, it's my favorite color, and I just felt like there was a version of this that could work in the style of the show. I think that initially this felt a little too bright for me. You know, Over the Garden Wall is kind of known for its more muted and desaturated colors, and I wasn't sure if this was a little too bright, but it's always better just to start off with something, and then you can see how it looks once, you know, all the pieces are put together. For skin tone, I usually just try to eyeball it and see what I think works best. And then same kind of goes for the hair. There are moments where I'll reference what, sometimes I'll look at other Asian characters in the show and see how their choices are made. But for the most part, I just go with my gut on it, and you're always free to experiment and see what works best. I'm just going to color in the eyes now and the teeth and, do the nose a different color as well as add some blush to my cheeks. Almost all of the characters, have those freckles and then they have a little bit of a blush underneath, which I really like and I think it looks really cute. So I'm definitely going to match that. And it already is starting to look a lot better just with those features adjusted. So for the sleeves, I'm going to try to choose a more muted color. I ended up changing the entire color altogether to a darker purple that was a little less saturated, and then using this nice light pale purple for the skirt underneath, just because this feels a lot more like the kind of palette that you would actually see in the show. And then I'm just going to go and kind of adjust the little frills. And yeah, I just chose a slightly darker, less saturated shade of purple for that. For the shoes, I went with this bluish gray. It felt like it, was very similar to Beatrice's color palette, and I also just liked it because I could use it for the hat color of my corgi. I really liked the idea of just having some, matching colors between my dog and my outfit. And now I'm just going to go through and do that lovely orange-ish corgi color that we all know and are familiar with. You can vary how saturated you want this to be and how bright and how orangey you want it to be, but I think I was pretty happy with this. I wanted to make sure it still popped and it still looked like a corgi, but I didn't want it to overwhelm the rest of the design. So yeah, and then for the what would typically be known as the white part of the corgi, I chose this really pale, barely off-white light orange shade. I just thought that it fit a little better, and I liked that it wasn't as severe looking as the starkness of a pure white. And yeah, I'm just gonna fill in his nose and his tongue and his little ears. And I think after that, I'm pretty happy with these shades. I changed the shoes at the last minute just because, I thought that this gray didn't make it feel like I was competing with the corgi's hat. So yeah, this is the final version of me as a character in Over the Garden Wall. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.